Al-Mahra Governorate, eastern Yemen, near the Oman border. The camera drops from satellite view to a dust-covered mountain road where convoys form, moving north. In 2023, Israeli archaeologists cataloged Yemeni Jewish artifacts abroad, while academic papers mapped southern Arabian Jewish lineages disrupted by war. Practically, this is heritage preservation and artifact recovery. Prophetically, many believe an ancient tribe scattered since 722 BC, when Assyria destroyed the northern kingdom, has been waiting in these mountains to be recognized. Genesis 49 verses 5-7 cursed Simeon to scattering. 1 Chronicles 4 verses 24-43 trace their clans southward toward Arabia. Now researchers cross-reference inscriptions, oral genealogies, and burial customs in war-torn terrain where elders die and evidence vanishes daily. One scholar noted last year that this place was named in scripture, and now it is moving again. If this is real, the window is closing now. You see the headline first as a footnote, buried in an academic briefing from 2023 on South Arabian Jewish remnants. The Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs quietly commissioned research into artifact repatriation from Yemen's eastern highlands, where trade routes once carried frankincense toward Hadramaut. For policymakers, it is about cataloging dispersed heritage before civil war erases it. For others, Genesis 49 verses 5-7 comes into focus. The verse says that Simeon and Levi are brothers, their swords are weapons of violence, and I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. The curse promised scattering. The question is whether scattering includes preservation. Researchers noted carbon-dated manuscripts, catalog numbers in European museums, and village elders in Al-Mahra who claim descent from the sons of Shimon. The map points here, not to coastal cities where most Yemeni Jews lived, but inland, toward mountain passes that lead north. Why here? Why does the geography matter? That is where the prophecy becomes specific. You expect the story to center on Sana'a, or the coastal regions where Operation Magic Carpet airlifted Yemeni Jews to Israel from 1949 to 1950, but those communities traced their lineage to later exiles, Babylonian, Persian, and Roman-era dispersions. The Simeonites, if they survived as a distinct group, would have scattered earlier, much earlier. After Assyria conquered the northern kingdom in 722 BC, tribal populations did not simply vanish. 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verses 24-43 records Simeonite clans moving south, toward the Negev, towards Seir, and along caravan routes that connected Judah to the Arabian incense trade. Place names survive in the biblical text, including Mount Seir, the territory of Edom, and settlements as far as Baal. The geography traces a clear pattern, away from Assyrian-controlled territory and following trade routes southward and eastward. Ancient maps, overlaid on modern borders, point toward Yemen's interior highlands, not the coast, not where you would think, always inland. A verse quietly names the direction. In 2024, Israeli NGOs and diaspora groups approached the findings cautiously. DNA evidence was limited and contested. Linguistic retention was fragmentary, but documented practices persisted. Circumcision on the 8th day, Sabbath observance variations, dietary restrictions reported by anthropologists in the 1970s before access became impossible. The Israeli chief rabbinate does not recognize distant communities without rigorous verification, ancestry, halakhic practice, rabbinical continuity. Yet Deuteronomy 30 verses 3-5 promises regathering. The Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he scattered you. For some, this fits the prophecy's scope. For others, it is premature identification. The tension is not new. Israel has debated similar claims from Ethiopia, India, and Central Asia for decades. What makes Yemen different is the geographic specificity. The custom survived where the name did not. Families preserved practices without fully understanding why. Evidence outlasted identity. The scattering pattern begins in 722 BC, when Assyria deported the northern tribes. But deportation was not extinction. Imperial records show populations moved in waves, some to Mesopotamian cities, others to frontier regions, where they mixed with local populations or migrated further. Simeon's allotment had always been precarious. Joshua 19 placed them inside Judah's territory, not as an independent region. When the northern kingdom fell, Simeonite clans had options. They could integrate into Judah, flee south toward wilderness regions, or follow trade routes into Arabia. Amos 9 verse 9 describes the mechanism. I will give the command, and I will shake the people of Israel among all the nations as grain is shaken in a sieve. The sieve does not destroy, it disperses. Babylonian and Persian conquests added secondary waves of migration. Map overlays trace movement from Mesopotamia toward Arabia's interior. Simeon disappears from Israel's tribal spotlight after the exile. But absence from the narrative is not absence from history. In the 1970s, anthropologist Shlomo Dov Goitain documented Yemeni Jewish communities practicing circumcision on the 8th day, a distinctly Abrahamic timeline that predates rabbinic standardization. Other groups observed echoes of the Sabbath without synagogue infrastructure, for example, rest patterns, refraining from fire, and dietary separations. The book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verses 11 to 12, envisions this kind of preservation. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. The question anthropologists could not answer was transmission. How do practices survive 2,700 years without institutional reinforcement? Oral genealogies in Al-Mahra villages, recorded before war made access impossible, claim descent from Bani Shimon, the sons of Simeon. Ethnographic notes are contested. DNA studies show Middle Eastern markers but cannot isolate tribal origin. The dual-layer problem persists. Anthropology documents customs, and covenant theology explains persistence. Somehow customs outlasted names. The settlements are not coastal. That is the first geographic clue researchers noticed when cross-referencing reports. Yemeni Jewish populations historically concentrated in Sana'a, Sa'ada, and accessible trade cities, but the communities claiming Simeonite lineage clustered inland in mountain villages in Al-Mahra and Hadramaut governorates, far from ports, positioned along ancient caravan routes that ran north toward Oman and the Arabian interior. Joshua chapter 19 gives Simeon cities within the inheritance of Judah, landlocked, dependent, embedded rather than independent. The pattern repeats in Yemen, not autonomous coastal cities, but interior villages linked to regional trade networks, always oriented northward. Modern researchers mapped settlement density and found clustering patterns that matched ancient tribal allotment structures, tight groups of villages sharing resources, not dispersed individuals. The camera pans inland, tracking roads that snake toward the Omani border, inland, always pointing north. Recognition came slowly. In 2019, a Hebrew University doctoral thesis compared Yemeni oral genealogies with biblical clan lists. In 2022, a documentary team interviewed elders before they died, recording testimonies of practices preserved since our fathers left the north. By 2024, enough correlations emerged that scholarly conferences included sessions on southern Arabian Israelite remnants. Ezekiel 37 verses 21 to 22 describes the vision. I will take the Israelites out of the nations where they have gone. I will gather them from all around and bring them back into their own land. I will make them one nation. Some scholars suggest the Yemeni communities fit this framework, not as certain tribal descendants, but as part of a broader pattern of preservation and return. Official recognition is another matter. The Israeli government has not extended law of return status. Recognition does not guarantee return, not yet, but the pattern is forming. The evidence is fragmentary but directional. Limited genetic studies conducted on small sample sizes in the 1990s before Yemen became inaccessible showed Middle Eastern haplogroup markers consistent with Levantine origin, though not conclusive for tribal identification. Linguistic analysis found Hebrew and Aramaic loanwords in local Arabic dialects, preserved in religious contexts. Jeremiah 31 verse 8 promises gathering from the land of the north, from the ends of the earth. The north matters. Geography is not incidental to prophecy, it is structural. Every major biblical return emphasizes direction, from Babylon in the north, from Egypt in the south, from Assyria in the northeast, and from the islands of the sea in the west. Yemen sits southeast of Israel, but the migration routes documented in 1st Chronicles move south, then curve back north through Arabian trade corridors. Science remains cautious, prophecy stays directional, charts overlay maps showing genetic markers, linguistic retention zones, and settlement clusters. Direction matters more than certainty. The pieces align spatially. The complications are significant. Yemen's civil war since 2014 has made fieldwork impossible. Researchers cannot verify claims in person. DNA sampling is incomplete. Rabbinical authorities require more evidence than oral tradition and fragmentary practices. Zechariah chapter 10 verses 8 to 10 anticipates obstacles. The prophet says, "I will signal for them and gather them in. Though I scatter them among the peoples, yet in distant lands they will remember me." The prophecy does not promise easy verification. It assumes difficulty, distance, and partial memory. Scholars dispute tribal certainty. Some argue the communities represent later Jewish migration mixed with local populations. Others see deliberate preservation across millennia. Both perspectives acknowledge the same facts. Practices survived, geography aligns, and timing coincides with renewed Israeli interest in diaspora communities. The debate is not whether they are there, it is what their presence means. Does delay cancel the pattern, or does the pattern persist precisely through delay? Why does Simeon fade so early in Israel's history? After Joshua, the tribe barely appears. The book of Judges mentions them once. The book of Kings ignores them. Chronicles gives one detailed genealogy, then silence. Genesis 49 explains it as curse fulfillment. Jacob condemns Simeon and Levi for violence at Shechem, declaring, "I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." Levi's scattering became sacred. Priests were distributed among all tribes. Simeon's scattering became obscurity. They were absorbed, dispersed, or driven to the margins. But prophecy's logic does not equate obscurity with extinction. Hidden tribes do not vanish. They wait. The Yemeni communities exist in this interpretive space. Documented presence, contested identity, prophetic possibility. For families in Al-Mahra, the labels matter less than survival. They preserved what they could, passed down what they remembered, and waited in mountain villages while empires rose and fell. The question is not whether they disappeared. It is whether anyone would notice when they return. Yemen is not isolated in these claims. Communities across Africa and Asia assert Israelite ancestry. Beta Israel in Ethiopia, B'nai Menashe in India's northeast, Lemba in southern Africa, Kaifeng Jews in China. Isaiah 49 verse 12 envisions global scope. The verse says, "See, they will come from afar, some from the north, some from the west, some from the region of Aswan." In 2020, researchers documented Jewish communities in China's Yunnan province. In 2021, Uganda's Abayudaya community sought recognition. The pattern is not Yemeni specific. It is part of a broader phenomenon where isolated groups preserved traditions, maintained identity claims, and eventually sought connection to modern Israel. Arrows on a global map converge toward Jerusalem from multiple continents. Critics call it wishful identification. Believers call it prophetic fulfillment. Both agree the communities exist, the practices are documented, and the desire for return is real. This is not an isolated case. It is one piece in a much larger puzzle. What happens next depends on verification. Israeli authorities would need rabbinical approval, DNA confirmation, and documented Jewish practice before extending immigration rights. Yemen's instability complicates access. Researchers cannot conduct fieldwork, families cannot travel safely, and artifact preservation is nearly impossible under wartime conditions. But pathways exist. If peace comes, heritage missions could document practices. If families reach third countries, DNA testing becomes feasible. If artifacts are cataloged internationally, linguistic and historical analysis can proceed. Deuteronomy 30 verses 3-5 promises restoration. Then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again. The prophecy does not specify a timeline, only certainty. For now, the Yemeni communities wait. Some live in mountain villages, some are displaced by war, some preserve scrolls and genealogies, hoping someone will eventually listen. The path from Al-Mahra to Jerusalem is not clear yet, but decision time is approaching. Zoom out. Simeon is not the whole story. It is one thread in a larger pattern. Israel has recognized and absorbed distant Jewish communities for decades. Ethiopian Jews were airlifted in operations Moses and Solomon. Indian B'nai Menashe were granted immigration rights in 2005. Ugandan Abayudaya converted and were welcomed in waves since the 2000s. Each case required verification, debate, and rabbinical approval. Each faced skepticism and political complexity, and each, for believers, fits within the prophetic arc of return described across Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Zechariah. The facts are verified, migrations happened, recognitions occurred, communities returned. The prophetic interpretation remains disputed, but undeniable in scope. On the map, another region shades in, not confirmed but possible, not certain but convergent. Yemen's Simeonite communities may join the list, or they may remain in scholarly debate for decades. Either way, the puzzle is not finished, but this piece just clicked, and the pattern keeps forming.